nothing.
Administration committee, what they did.
Right. They don't.
What committee?
Yeah, okay. He's mentioning how Congress handled this. I mean, once again, we filed complaints in Florida State Court. The court ignored a U.S. Supreme Court case that said it had jurisdiction to hear the contest and dismiss the contest. We filed contest before the House Committee on Administration and the House of Representatives, which once again in 2007, this is a 2006 election, we're contesting this in 2007, it's a democratically controlled Congress, and they ignored the law to sweep it under the rug. Evidence that votes had been stolen from Democrats, they swept under the rug. Now actually that's against the law, and I have sent a letter to them and pointed out that if they didn't want to follow the law there, then I was going to file suit in federal court in Washington, D.C., seeking an injunction requiring Congress to follow the law. Okay, but that was swept under the rug. Complaint showing the evidence, once again, to the appropriate authorities that should have instituted a criminal investigation, they did nothing with. And once again, that's because our right to walk in and present evidence of criminal conduct to a grand jury has been stolen from us. Now, we've heard Abraham Lincoln famously said, we're a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. If you've read the Constitution, you see in the Constitution that they specifically say that we cannot have titles of nobility in our country. Now, they call people czars and stuff, but I'm not really going there with that. But if you've read history, you've probably heard that there was a movement among some of the people right after the Revolutionary War to have George Washington become king and establish a new monarchy. Just like a European monarchy, with Washington as king and princes and barons and such. But unfortunately, the majority of the founders said, no, we want a government where the people's rights are respected. Now, do you think they would have said, but you know what we're going to do? We're going to make people beg a prosecuting prince to take action when a crime is committed? Of course not. That's not how it worked. That's the new version of your rights. The new version of your rights ignores your rights. When a crime is committed against you now, you have to beg law enforcement. You have to beg a prosecutor to take action. And guess what? If the crime's been committed by a government agent, they will do nothing. Our government has admitted, and if you want to look at this, by the way, I write for the Daily Censored right now. That's the blog for Project Censored. It's the premier media reform watchdog organization. It's the Daily Censored. You can go there and you can see the information I'm about to tell you. You can Google why does the U.S. government torture people and find this too. Okay, the U.S. government has admitted that 2 people each day, 2 Americans each day, are beaten to death by law enforcement. 2 Americans each day, beaten to death by law enforcement. Do you hear about that in the news? No. Do those people want some justice for the family members that are beaten to death? Of course they do. Did you hear about the 2 weeks of rioting in Oakland after the law enforcement officers shot Oscar Grant and killed him after he had consented to be in handcuffs and was laying on the ground? 2 weeks of rioting before the local prosecuting prince finally said, hey, we're going to charge this guy. Now, the trial hasn't occurred yet, but unfortunately, in the small instances where they do actually charge someone in government for violating somebody's rights and murdering them, they usually make sure they submarine the prosecution. Like Martin Anderson, when he was beaten to death in Florida. They submarined the prosecution. They put on a medical examiner that had a ludicrous story about the cause of death. saying he died from sickle cell trait. Okay? He was beaten for 30 minutes, but that's not what killed him. It was sickle cell trait. Well, that's ludicrous. That is ludicrous. But the prosecutor put that ludicrous testimony on, and as a result, all those guards that killed that boy got away. They didn't see jail time. And that's because part of the right to petition for redress of grievances was that once you had an indictment from a grand jury, you had the option of prosecuting the criminal. Or you could hire an attorney to prosecute the criminal. Or then, if you couldn't afford to get an attorney and you couldn't do it yourself, then the public prosecutor was supposed to help you. Well, that's changed. And now the public prosecutor stands as a gatekeeper, keeping those who are harmed by those with power from ever seeking redress. Now, if you Google that, you'll also find out, once again, if you Google, why does the U.S. government torture people, you'll find other horrible things our government has admitted to, which I'm going to go ahead and throw it out here. It admitted to 130 Americans are raped every day in government custody. 130 every day raped in government custody. That's what they admit to. And they say in there, and Congress admitted to this, this is congressional findings. They say in there that does not include strip searches. If you look at the Fourth Amendment, you'll see that to search somebody's person, you have to have a warrant submitted by somebody in law enforcement to a judge showing probable cause that that person needs to be searched. So all the strip searches that are done actually unconstitutionally. And in fact, right here locally, a few years ago, the state attorney's daughter was picked up on Flagler Beach on a typical abuse of power charge by law enforcement. They claimed she was disorderly and arrested her. And then they took her down to the jail and they said, "We want to strip search it." And she said, "My dad's the state attorney. Why don't you call him?" You got to be kidding me. So she didn't consent. So then they choked her until she passed out, and then they strip searched her. Okay, that was right here in this town. So if anyone's hearing this on the internet and they think, "Hey, I'm in law enforcement, I'm in government, I've got big bucks, it's not going to happen in my family," you're wrong. All they have to do is run across the wrong cop who will make up a story and arrest them, and if they're young and pretty, they're gonna get strip searched, folks. Do you want to put your daughters through that? Or do you want to stand up and say, "I want my rights to control my government. I want the right to make sure my votes are counted, and I want the right to go into a grand jury and say this crime was committed, and I want some redress." Act now. Otherwise, if you don't, we will not even be able to sit here and speak to 100 people 10 years from now. Thank you very much.
Excellent.
I got more.